Shall I start?
Yeah, please.
Fine. Hello, all, and thank you for joining this session on industrial symbiosis. My name is Ankit Kapasi from DSS Plus. Previously, you have already all heard about the basic concept and foundations of industrial symbiosis. So, I will not spend much time in this session redefining industrial symbiosis. Instead, I want to focus on a more practical question. How do we actually find good industrial symbiosis opportunities inside an industrial park? How can you, as tenant companies, as participants today, find these opportunities? We'll look at the information we need, the tools we can use, how companies can identify opportunities together, and importantly, how do we distinguish an interesting idea from a project that is actually realistic and implementable? In the second part of this presentation today, I will share several international examples, not simply as success stories, but also to understand why those examples worked and what we can learn from them for industrial parks here across Vietnam. So, thank you all once again for joining today. Just to connect with earlier discussions you had, there are several different forms of industrial symbiosis. The one most people normally think about first is byproduct exchange. One company's waste becomes another company's raw material. But industrial symbiosis can equally be about water, steam, heat, or common utilities. It can be about sharing laboratories, logistics, or even maintenance services. It can involve companies locating suppliers and customers close together. And it can even extend beyond the industrial park to the surrounding city, which is your urban industrial symbiosis, as you've heard before. So, as we go into the exercise for identification of industrial symbiosis opportunities, I would encourage you to keep this broader picture in mind. What are the different kinds of symbiosis and synergies? We are not only looking for waste, we are looking for underused resources, infrastructure, and capabilities. That is the overarching idea. So here we move from the question, what is industrial symbiosis, to how do I identify the right industrial symbiosis project in my industrial park? So here there are four questions I would like you to keep in mind. First, how much information do we actually need before we can recognize an opportunity? The second question is, where can databases and identification tools help us? And where do we still need engineering judgment? The third question is, how can discussions between companies reveal opportunities that a spreadsheet or any other exercises or tools may never identify? And finally, when we look at international examples, how do we translate them into something useful in our own industrial parks in Vietnam? So the important point is this: success for you is not finding 100, 200 possible exchanges or symbiosis. Success is finding a small number of opportunities that companies are willing and able to investigate seriously. They have to be practical, they have to be realistic, they have to be specific, and they have to be actionable. When we first talk to a company, the obvious question we hear often is, what waste do you have and what could you do with it, as I said earlier? But that only identifies a theoretical match. So imagine company A produces 20 tons of materials every month. Company B could potentially use that as material. That sounds like an industrial symbiosis. It is. But now we ask a second set of questions. Does company A produce 20 tons every month or only occasionally? Is the composition of that consistent? Does it have contaminants? Does it keep changing? Can company B accept those variations? How far apart are those two companies, those two plants? Does the material need storage? Is it legally classified as waste? Who becomes responsible if the material causes a production problem? So suddenly, what looked like an opportunity looks different. It might become a problem. Not to say it is not an industrial symbiosis, but it could potentially not be. There are many factors. This is why we need to understand three sides of every potential exchange. One is the supplier, what exactly is available. Two is the user, what exactly can they accept? And three, the industrial park, what infrastructure or coordination is required. So, my suggestion is do not wait until you have a perfect database. Get enough information to see the opportunity and then progressively improve the data around opportunities that look promising to you. So, with those principles in mind, let us look systematically at how opportunities can be identified. So, here there is no single method for finding industrial symbiosis opportunity. When people say, how do you identify? There's not one method. The most comprehensive approach is to collect the inputs and outputs of companies. You know, you have a flow diagram. What goes in must come out. So if 100 goes in, 80 comes out, what is the 20 lost? And then you look for matches. But data alone is not enough. You need bilateral discussions, extremely important. A production manager, for example, may tell you, we have a problem with excess low pressure steam, or our wastewater treatment plant has spare capacity. That opportunity may not appear in a waste inventory. Not everything that is wasteful is identified in a waste inventory. So, international case studies are yet another example or a useful source. What have good practices uh, taught us before? If we know that a particular combination of industries has created a successful exchange culture elsewhere, we can test whether similar conditions may exist in your path. Then conducting workshops are useful because when you have these interactive workshops, you have knowledge exchange, dialogue exchange, and companies discover things about each other that they normally do not know. And then finally, there are automated tools that can accelerate the matching process. So the important word over here is combine these. The strongest identification process normally uses several of these methods together. So do not just depend on one in most cases. So let's look at, we talked about toolkits. Let's look at toolkits. This is an example of the UNIDO Industrial Symbiosis Identification Toolkit. The idea is quite simple. Over here, you can start with a company type or with a particular byproduct or a waste stream. And the tool will help identify possible suppliers, possible users, and examples where similar exchanges have been observed elsewhere. For example, rather than starting with a blank page, not knowing anything at all, and asking, what could a chemical company exchange, for example, the tool will give us a set of possible relationships that we can investigate. And this is very useful at early identification stage because it makes our search faster. But there is a limitation to this. And this takes us to the next slide. I will show that to you. And I will also show you the tool if we have time a little later on in the presentation towards the end. But let's look at the limitation. The best way to think about an IS tool, this particular toolkit, is as a hypothesis generator. It can say company A may have something company B could use. That is very useful. But the tool does not know whether the material from your factory has exactly the required composition. It does not know whether you produce enough of it. It does not know whether receiving company is willing to change its processes, for example. It may not know the local regulatory conditions or transport risk, or it does not know whether storage might be an issue. So the tool will answer, it will tell you, where should I look? The engineering and business assessment will then answer, does this particular opportunity actually work? So the toolkit is an important starting point. And this distinction is very important because otherwise we can generate hundreds of theoretical matches without creating a single real project. So, very useful toolkit to start off the identification exercise. Moving on, let's say when you look at your own factory after this session, I suggest you use the following 5 lenses, different kind of glasses. Firstly, look at the byproduct. What materials leave my processes? So you have your final product, but beyond it, what is a byproduct? It may be classified as waste. It may not even be classified. You don't understand or know that you are not able to use it well. Second is utilities. Do I have spare steam, excess heat, treated water, compressed air, cooling capacity, or any other utility? The third is services. Can several companies share, for example, laboratories, transport, training, emergency response, or maintenance? Fourth is the supply chain. Could one supplier company amongst all of you or customer benefit from being located nearby? Or could several companies who are in this room today come together jointly to source something? And fifth, the urban industrial interface. Could the industrial park exchange water, energy, materials, or services with the surrounding local area, with the city, with the local urban population? So the question therefore changes from what waste do I have to what do I have too much of, or what do I need, and what is currently expensive, or what is currently difficult for my business. Look at it. This is the industrial symbiosis, different types, but look at it from this lens, and that will be very useful. So once we know where to look, what we look for is evidence. And this is where you become a detective. This is why I would not rely on one questionnaire alone. Here we are talking about a, a, a resource passport. A site walkthrough tells you what is physically happening, sometimes very different from what spreadsheets suggest. You can have bilateral interviews that talks about future investment plans, operational constraints, and willingness to cooperate. There will be tools which will provide you matches. International cases will give you analogies. And the industrial park master plan can show existing and future infrastructure and what possible tenants are coming in. So, in practice, we often talk about triangulation. If one source suggests an opportunity, it is an idea. If two or three independent sources support that idea, we start to have confidence. Multiple people need to support it. For example, the data shows excess treated water. A site visit will confirm a stable flow, and another company will tell that it expects to increase water demand. And with these three criteria in mind, we have something worth investigating. So, rule is one evidence stream will give idea, two or three evidence stream will create confidence. You need several people talking about it, not just one company. That's where industrial symbiosis becomes fruitful. So my recommendation is to create what we call a resource passport. We looked at it in the earlier slide. It should be practical rather than complicated. For any important stream, I want you to understand 6 things. What is it? How much is there? What is the quality? When is it available? What does it currently cost you? And what constraints exist? So, for example, consider treated wastewater. Knowing that a company produces, say, 500 cubic meters per day is useful, but not enough. You will also need to understand what the water quality is. Is the flow continuous or only during certain shifts? What does the company currently spend treating and discharging it? What water quality would another company require? We took a look at this earlier. This is an example of water. Same applies to heat. Temperature matters, pressure matters, distance matters. And companies do not have to disclose every confidential detail at the beginning. You start with approximate recurring figures. You say that normally in the first quarter, this is how much we generate, or this is how much we require. Not exact data, it is okay. If an opportunity becomes interesting, if everything is there, then obtain samples. you get metering data, you get invoices, and then you go into more detailed technical and financial feasibility analysis. So the objective here is not to collect uh, lots of data, just enough data to make a decision, not data just for the sake of collecting it. Um, so looking at data analysis, this is where we ended. A database match is like a lead in a sales pipeline. It is not yet a project. It is something you have identified as a lead, an opportunity. Now we take the potential match and test it. Suppose our tool says that gypsum from one company could be used by another company. Before we call it industrial symbiosis, you put it through 7 different steps. Is there enough volume? Is it sufficiently continuous? Is the quality acceptable? And is the contamination controlled? Do the timing and storage arrangement work? Can we physically move the material or the heat or the water or gas between these companies? Is it safe and legally permitted? Is there enough economic value to justify the change? And finally, how confident are we in the data? Is it a one off or is it a trend? The last question is often forgotten. If, for example, one company has a certain amount of water or waste or steam, that is not a continuous recurring data. So that question, how confident are we in data, is important. Over the years, I have seen many industrial symbiosis opportunities fail because it was not based on long-term recurring data. So please remember that. A measured flow from 12 months of meter reading is very different from someone saying, I think we produce about 10 tons. You need something more concrete when you identify that. After this screening, we should have a much shorter list of what I call validated hypotheses, ideally that are now strong enough to justify more detailed pre-feasibility work. So on this thought, I'm going to ask you a quick question. Let us test that thinking with a very quick example. We have 4 possible opportunities. I would like you to take a look at these for a few seconds and decide which one of these 4 opportunities would you investigate first. I'm not necessarily saying that um, one of them is the only industrial symbiosis opportunity. They could all be there. But my question is, which one, based on what I said earlier, would you investigate first? I'm going to give you 10, 15 seconds. Please read through the 4 options and suggest what your responses are. So the options are A, factory has some sludge, but no data on quantity or composition. B, a boiler releases steady 120 Celsius waste heat next to a food drying operation needing low grade heat. C, a tenant produces mixed plastic waste, but it changes every week and has no segregation. And D, 2 firms want to share trucks but have different routes and no schedule visibility. What is your choice? My choice is B, the waste heat opportunity. I'm sure many of you thought the same. Why? We already know several useful things in this opportunity. The heat is steady. We know the approximate temperature, 120 degrees. There is a nearby user that is identified. The user already requires low grade heat. That is known. So we have both supply and demand. We also have proximity, which makes an infrastructure connection conceivable. It makes it slightly more realistic. It is still not a project. We would still need a heat load profile, for example, heat exchanger design, the route of the pipe. We will need understand capex. We need operational arrangements and agreement on who carries the risk. But compared with the other options, we already have enough evidence to justify spending money on a pre-feasibility study. And this is exactly what good identification should achieve. This is what I have been trying to tell you in the past few slides, right? So we've been talking about how to identify and how to make an idea to a pre-feasibility. Data and tools are powerful, but industrial symbiosis ultimately requires two or more organizations to agree to do something differently. And this is why what is important is participatory methods. Participation matters over here. But I would avoid an open ended brainstorming session where everyone simply suggests ideas. A stronger approach is more structured. Each company first will have a simple resource card showing what it produces, what it needs, and maybe some key constraints. And then you identify and group them into opportunities. These are opportunities about materials, these are opportunities for utilities or services, and so on. And we then identify potential supplier and user pairs. And then importantly, we ask what could stop the deal? What may go wrong? Is the quality specification unclear? Is transport expensive? Is there a permit issue? Does one company need a 5 year contract before investing? So, a good session should finish with something very tangible, a potential supplier, a potential user, the missing information, and somebody responsible for the next step, the next conversation. Otherwise, we will have an interesting workshop, but not an advanced industrial symbiosis project. So, normally, when we have longer sessions on industrial symbiosis, we would run this as a little workshop under these four steps. You could do that if you have the time today, or when you go back, or when you meet again as a group with different tenant companies or the industrial park manager. This is a kind of exercise you can do where the output becomes more concrete. All right. Moving on. One simple way of looking at industrial symbiosis mapping is you can do this even within your own company after today's session. You can select one real resource stream from your factory. Then ask who might use this. It can be any resource, any byproduct, any end material that you have no use of, and say who might use this. It might be a material you are sourcing, it might be a utility you are using, and say who else might use this. And before thinking about the technology, write down the first question about the potential user is likely to ask you. If you are going to give it to someone, exchange it with someone, think from their point of view. Perhaps questions like, be clear, what is the composition? How much do I have on a regular basis? What price do I want them to pay me? Or do I need to pay them a specific price? What are the cost uh, issues related to that? How reliable is the supply? And then classify the main barrier. Is it data? Is it quality? Is it logistics, regulation, finance, or simply trust or connection between organizations? If you know what the barrier is, you might be able to overcome it. In my experience, this is very revealing because the first barrier is often not technology. Technology you will be able to get, it is available. But all these uncertainties over information, commercial value, or responsibility are very, very large topics over here. So these are the different rounds, and this is how an IS mapping exercise can happen, an industrial symbiosis mapping can happen. Once you identify multiple opportunities, either in a group or on your own, what do you need to do? You need to prioritize. Not every opportunity is useful. So, over here on this sheet, you will see a prioritization matrix. On the y axis, you look at achievability or readiness. Is it difficult to achieve? Then it's at the lower end. Is it easy to achieve? It's at the other end. And then the benefits, are they low? Then at the left side of the x-axis, are they high on the right side of the x-axis? And the simple matrix will ask two questions. How valuable could this opportunity be? And how achievable is it? High benefit, relatively achievable opportunities will naturally, become priority options, the one on the top right. And they will be the one that deserve attention. But again, before spending money and moving on to pre feasibility, I would ask five questions, or I will add 5 filters. First, is there an anchor user, someone who genuinely wants a resource, credible data? Can we see a workable EHS and legal route? Fourth, can we physically connect the companies through transport, through pipelines, through storage, through land? And fifth, can we imagine a commercial model? All these questions are very important. For example, if one company must invest, let's say $1 million, but almost all of the savings go to the other company. The technical opportunity may be excellent, but the commercial arrangement will fail unless they agree how the value is shared. So, a good industrial park scan may identify many ideas, but I would prefer to leave with perhaps 5 to 10 prioritized opportunities with very clear next actions rather than 50 untested ideas. So you will have initially, through all the tools and the methodology we talked about, you can start identifying dozens of opportunities, but this prioritization will ask you, is it moving from a good idea to, is it worth spending money on a pre-feasibility budget or investing in the actual opportunity? So, how do you then turn identification into action? You identified, you have shortlisted, you are going into pre feasibility. Park residents should see exactly what a credible next step looks like. And this is where industrial symbiosis becomes a business project. We start with a hypothesis. Say company A has something that company B might require or they might value. The pre-feasibility will then ask whether it works technically and economically. And if that answer is yes, it is a positive answer, we develop a business case. And only then do we move to implementation. So a technical feasibility and a financial feasibility is extremely important. A credible business case needs more than environmental benefits. It has to be what we call a best practicable environmental option. It is not only the best environmental option. We need capacity, we need reliability, we need technology, let's say treatment, transfer, storage, and metering. We need economics, savings, capex, opex, payback, ROI. We need to look at environmental health and safety as well as other regulatory clarity. We need a commercial structure. Who will run the asset? Who will pay for it? What is the tariff? What happens if one company stops production? And finally, we need measurement and verification, MRV, measurement, reporting, verification. So both companies, or if there are multiple companies in there, they all know whether the exchange is delivering what was agreed. This is the point I particularly want to emphasize before we end this part of the session, which is industrial symbiosis succeeds when an environmental opportunity becomes a reliable commercial arrangement. Always remember that, please. So, with that process in mind, let us now look internationally and see how very different industrial symbiosis models have developed in practice. You might have heard many of these. So I've deliberately selected only some examples that work in different ways. Kallenberg, for example, all of you probably have heard of it, grew mainly because bilateral commercial relationships gradually became a larger network. In Kwinana, what we can see is that what can happen around a dense, heavy industry cluster with anchor companies and a common infrastructure. This was their benefit. In Rotterdam, we have seen examples or the importance of infrastructure and a defined market. In Japan, Kawasaki demonstrated the relationship between industrial symbiosis, urban policy, and anchor recycling industries. And the UK's NISP programs or the South Africa WISP will show a completely different model where a broker or a facilitator actively creates matches between companies. So the lesson is not to copy Kallenberg or Rotterdam or NISP or WISP. The important question for you as industrial park tenants, as companies who are looking at opportunities, is what mechanism is most appropriate here for my company? Is there an anchor company? Am I the anchor company? Is there a strong shared utility? Do you maybe need a broker, someone who can organize this? Is there a connection with the surrounding city? Understanding that mechanism is more useful than simply copying an industrial waste exchange. Very quickly, looking at examples, Kallenberg is probably the most famous industrial symbiosis example. So I will not spend too much time describing individual exchanges. What I think is more interesting is how the system developed. It did not begin with someone designing a complete eco industrial park on paper. Individual companies developed a practical bilateral exchanges where there was a business reason to cooperate. One successful relationship created confidence for another. Infrastructure developed, information and trust improved, and over time, what began as an individual project became a much more coordinated ecosystem that you see in the middle over there. Lots of industrial symbiosis were developed. So today, this network reports substantial annual savings in groundwater, materials, carbon emissions, as you can see on the screen. So for me, the transferable lesson is you do not need to discover the entire symbiosis network on day one. That will happen eventually. Start with one or two strong projects, demonstrate that they work, and then build around them. Another example is Quinana, again very well known, but it is useful because it represents a very different industrial environment. As I mentioned earlier, it is a dense, large, heavy industry cluster. There are chemicals, minerals, refining, utilities, major infrastructure, more than 170 commercial product, byproduct, and utility exchanges operate across the western trade coast. But what I want you to notice is that the symbiosis is not simply a list of waste exchanges. There are large anchor companies who create dependable flows and demands. They are the ones who decide what, they act as a broker. What is required? What is the demand? What is the supply? Infrastructure makes exchanges technically possible. They have the infrastructure for it. Commercial arrangements keep them operating, and cluster level coordination helps address issues that an individual factory cannot solve on its own. That is why I use the phrase map the industrial operating system. Look at materials, certainly, but also map utilities, pipelines, port, road infrastructure, service providers, suppliers, labor, future investment. Map all of it because this is where industrial symbiosis or synergies lie. Sometimes the most valuable synergy is created by connecting those systems rather than by exchanging conventional waste. These two examples, what you see, look quite different, but they teach the same fundamental lesson. For example, in Rotterdam, in Netherlands, industrial CO2 is captured. It is conditioned and supplied through pipeline infrastructure to generate greenhouse to supply to greenhouse growers. The network supplies around 500,000 tons per year to approximately 600 greenhouse companies. According to the case information that we have received, right? What transforms CO2 from an unwanted stream to a useful product? Not simply the fact that someone wanted CO2, but that there was quality specification, pressure, infrastructure, and reliable offtake. All of that was available. Same in Japan. Kawasaki illustrates the same principle with materials. So the eco-town model linked urban and industrial waste with recycling facilities and large industrial users such as cement and steel. So those anchor companies or anchor users are important because secondary materials often change. A sufficiently large industrial process may be able to absorb that variation provided that the material meets the specification. So the lesson from both these examples is markets for secondary resource do not appear automatically. They are created when supply, specification, infrastructure, and demand are designed to work together. These examples that you see show another model entirely. I mentioned the UK and South Africa industrial symbiosis programs. Sometimes companies are not located next door to each other. They may not even know what the neighboring industries need, and they may be reluctant to reveal resource information publicly. In that situation, a brokered network, someone who can create all that database, will be able to create the market. For example, the UK's NISP model, companies provided information on underused resources. Facilitators then helped identify and they developed the cross sector opportunities. Again, in South Africa, they used a similar approach supported by government and delivered by Green Cape. So the program reports material diversion, carbon savings, job creation, as you can see on the slide. But what is important is that the broker is doing much more than matching the two database entries. They help obtain better data. They introduce companies, they overcome technical barriers, they maintain momentum until an opportunity becomes a project. So, where companies do not naturally know or trust one another, facilitation by an individual or a company becomes part of the industrial symbiosis infrastructure. And that is very important. So let me now bring this back to your company. We looked at these examples. I will sum up now. What could you actually do? We talked about all of this. What can you actually do after today's workshop? So I've got a 30, 60, 90-day plan. In the first 30 days, do something very simple. Select maybe three important resource streams from your company, something you produce, something you use or consume, or something that creates a significant cost or an operational problem with you. Three things, right? What you produce, what you consume, and what might be a cost or operational problem. And then create a basic resource passport for each of them. That is the first thing. Understand what it is. In the next 30 days, you start using the tools, the discussion with industrial park, and examples from other industries to develop perhaps 3 to 5 possible matches. That's what you do in the next 30 days. Then speak to the potential partners and collect the missing information. And then in the last 30 days, by around 90 days, the aim is not to have implemented industrial symbiosis. The aim is to have one, two, maybe five credible projects that will go into pre-feasibility. So if you want to use the exercise that we have here, take one stream from your own company and answer 5 questions. What is it? Who could use it or supply it? What information is missing? What is the main barrier? Who should you speak to next? And that last question is very important. Without an owner or the next action, opportunities will simply remain on the slides. So that is very important. And I leave you with a final thought or three questions, and it will be these. First, do you really understand the resource stream? Not only what it is, but quantity, quality, timing, and current cost. Second, do we understand the user of that resource team? Who needs a resource? What specification do they require? What is the real economic reason for them to participate? No one does it for free. No one does it if it is too expensive. So make sure there is an economic reason. And third, do you understand the project? Who wants it? Who will invest? What are the risks? What is the next decision? If you can start answering these three questions, you are no longer talking about a theoretical circular economy idea or an industrial symbiosis idea. You are beginning to create a credible industrial synergy project. And that ultimately is the objective, turning hidden resource flows into practical business relationships. So, on that note, I will say thank you very much. I hope the key message from this session will be useful, and it is that industrial symbiosis does not depend on having perfect data or sophisticated technology at the start. It begins with looking at your industrial park differently, looking at your streams differently, understanding what companies have, what they need, and where a shared solution can create business value. Once again, thank you all. And I hope some of these ideas will help you identify the next industrial symbiosis project within your own park. Thank you. If we have some time, maybe I will quickly show you. Uh, Give me a moment. I will quickly demonstrate what the toolkit looks like. You still can see my screen. We looked at the industrial symbiosis identification tool. The instructions are on the first tab. The tool can be shared by colleagues at VNCPC, but simply, as I said earlier, you can search by byproducts or search by company. So you go to the first tab over here, you go to a byproduct waste stream, and let's say you select uh, bottom ash over here. There are no similar byproducts, but it talks about who could be a possible provider. So if you require bottom ash, you can look at coal power plant or biomass power plant. Or if you produce bottom ash, possible user could be a mining industry. And then examples and comments for case studies are listed down over here. So over here, there are dozens of examples, simply waste steel. Similar byproduct is a steel scrap waste collection system, iron and steel industry will be a possible user, and some examples are given over here. The next tab over here is how you search by company. So all you need to do is again drop down and say you are, let's say, a composting facility, or even better, let's go to calcium carbonate plant over here. It says possible inputs are white mud or carbon dioxide. Possible providers will be pulp and paper, coal power plant, ethanol plant, biogas producer, ammonia plant, and then some examples are given over here. So, in the interest of time, I will not go any further, but this tool can be shared with you. It's simple to use. A reminder is this tool does not necessarily tell you that this is the final byproduct. It tells you that this is a possible or a potential industrial symbiosis opportunity, and you can build on it further. So, once again, thank you all for listening. And if you have any questions, reach out to my colleagues at VNCPC, or they can give you my details and you can be in touch with me as well. Thank you all. Thank you for listening.
Yes, thank you, Ankit, for
Thank you.
your very interesting presentation.
Is that okay?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
I mean the time is for the main presentation is a bit over 38 minutes, but I think it could be
Is
okay.
that
And
okay?
if yeah, 38 minutes. And for the how say the quick introduction of the tool, just 3 minutes.
Two, three
I
minutes. So
think
yeah,
that's
we
yeah.
can, you can maybe stop the recording over here as well.
Yep, I see you drop the thank you at the ending slide. So yeah, it depends on Nam, and I think the depend on the actual situation. So we will consider to yeah to
Okay.
include that part.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you want me to, I can record it separately and keep it to 30 minutes. I can do it once again on my own with a
Mhm.
colleague and send you a 30-minute one as well if you want it shorter.
Yeah, I will check with Nam. Nam, anh ấy hỏi là thế tại bài trình bày mình là 38 phút, chị thấy là từ 10 giờ 45 à cho đến 11 giờ 23 thì theo chương trình đấy thì em thấy thế nào? Ý là có dùng cái bạn này được không hay là phải bạn ngắn hơn thì anh ấy sẽ ấy. Em đang tắt mic Nam ạ.
Được chị ạ. Tại vì cái
Ừ,
chương trình mình cũng bố trí
linh
một
động.
chút thời gian linh động được trong khoảng 10-15 phút.
Yeah. Yes. Nam says confirm that he also arranged the agenda a bit flexibility. So I think 38 minutes. We think it could be okay.
Is
That's
okay?
good.
Okay.
Good
If
enough. Yeah.
if you
You
need me
talk
to
not
do that,
so quick. So I
yeah.
think it's easy to catch up and follow.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you need me to, I can record it again tomorrow or Saturday and send it to you for 30 minutes on my own. So I'm not wasting your time. But
Mhm.
if it is okay, then that's great.
Yeah, yeah, I think it could be okay, and we will check again. I mean, it's a file. If have any recording problem or any, we will inform you
No
soon.
problem.
Yeah,
If
and
that's the
Keith,
case, yeah,
another favor, could you share with us your slide
yes,
presentation?
I
So
will do that right away
yeah,
after this call. Yeah.
yeah, it better in the format, so we need to translate to Vietnamese. and we will share to participant like the workshop document in
Yes,
Vietnamese.
please.
They
Yes, please.
easier to follow.
Absolutely. And if you need to add any other, bits at the end, if you want to put my contact details or VNC pieces, you can feel free to do that on the last slide.
Yeah, yes.
Is that okay? Perfect.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right. Very good. So any other questions you have, let me know. On Monday evening, I'm flying out to Jakarta. On Wednesday, when you have the session,
Yep.
Thursday next week, right?
Yep.
20th. If you need me for any reason, if there are questions, if there is, to and fro, you can let me know an hour in advance and I'll find a quiet place and join if required.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. Yeah,
All right.
yeah.
Great.
Thank you for
Okay.
your kind arrangement.
Okay. No
Yeah.
problem. Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you all. And quite busy, busy mission. I saw you fly to different place.
Yeah. Too many things go. No, yesterday in Thailand it was a holiday, so I enjoyed my holiday. But then yes, I'm traveling a lot these days, so a little busy, but all good. Work keeps you busy. It's a good thing.
Yes, still on track, right? Yeah, thanks.
Absolutely.
Now,
I hope
câu
things
hỏi
are.
gì nữa? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All the best and
Yeah,
thank you all so much.
yeah, thank you very much. And
Thank
have
you.
a good mission in Jakarta coming time. Yeah.
Thank you and good luck with you as well. Good
Yeah,
luck.
hope to see you soon in Vietnam, in Hanoi.
Yeah, I would
Yeah,
love
long
to.
time.
I'd love to. Let's hope we have the opportunity soon. If not,
Yeah.
you're all always welcome to India. I would love to have, host you over here.
Yeah,
If you
we
come
love
here,
that. We hope that have chance to come there.
for sure. For
Yeah,
sure.
sure. Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you. Yeah,
Thank
bye
you
All
very
bye.
right.
much.
Take
Bye
care.
bye.
Bye bye.
Năm ơi chắc là ấy nhờ, xong rồi em dừng rồi em check nha, nếu có vấn đề